You're listening to Resist and Restore, a podcast from the Circle of Hope pastors where we're extending the table of our dialogue. I'm Jonny.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Julie.
And my brother Ben is away right now, so he won't be with us. But this is our Season 2 debut episode. It's very exciting. So glad that you journeyed with us for Season 1. As I said in the promo to this season's focusing on people in our community and adjacent to it, whose voices we want to bring to you, whose perspectives and vocations we hope will bless you. The first season was really about who we are and what we do. This time we're really trying to bring the community to you, so I hope it blesses you. And on today's episode, I interview my good friend, Andrew Yang, who is really one of the best songwriters I've ever met, and he has really encouraged our community with some great music. Wouldn't you say that, Rachel and Julie?
Absolutely. He's of the best.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I hope that you enjoy that. You'll listen to some of his songs and what other artists have done with his songs, and you'll be able to follow him on social so you can keep track of that. Let's start today with Talkback. We like to hear from you. So if you want to write to us, go to Resist and Restore Podcast at circleofhope.net and send us an email. Just reacting to what we're saying will definitely get you on the air. Today, who has been talking back to us are people during Resurrection Sunday sharing stories of resurrection. Super good to hear how people in this deadly pandemic are experiencing the resurrection of Jesus in a real way. And so we want to bring those stories to you now. Sound okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are worth repeating. I'm thinking about a story someone shared at sunrise on Easter morning in the park in Germantown. One of my friends shared about how she has been essentially like working on the front lines with all the healthcare workers and providers who are in the thick of things with people and seeing death and illness and suffering compounded in this pandemic, and just all the grief that she has carried along with all of their staff all year long, and what has sustained her, the life through death that has sustained her, is this deepening connection with God in the grief. She talked about a prayer corner that she set up in her house. You know, it's so hard to delineate these spaces and times when we're quarantining. And she set aside this space that she goes to light a candle, to pray, to sit in stillness, to weep. And God has met her there over and over again. So I'm just thinking of all those essential workers and healthcare workers in particular that navigate death on a daily basis. It's too much for any one person to bear, but Jesus is sustaining folks with in the midst of all the grief, because Jesus himself bears it all.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's powerful. She made space for the process with God for herself.
Didn't try to shut it down or cut it off or just go numb, but allowed herself to bring that grief over and over again, bring the sense of helplessness that she feels, all of that to Jesus.
Wow. I talked with a friend who had lost her job, like so many folks over the past year. So many changes in employment. And this friend had worked at her job for 20 years. And so it was a huge deal to be losing it and wondering what she's going to do next. But she felt like God really gave her a new vocation in foster care parenting. She'd been doing it all along, but now she's really embracing it as her vocation from God. and she's able to dive in more fully, and was even able to make arrangements for how to, have enough money and make things work. But it was beautiful to see the joy and the peace in her, even in the job loss, with this new assignment from God to care for these kids, and just gives me hope that God will keep directing us to the work that we can do, even if it's a big change from what we were doing before.
I was moved by a story that someone shared during our sunrise observance about how her marriage just wasn't working the way that she wanted to. And she was very vulnerable in sharing the difficulty of it. And allowing ourselves to fully experience our suffering um, creates a vacancy within us that allows real resurrection to happen in. And even though everything didn't work out, the possibility and the hope that resurrection brings, the newness, it points to where things are working when so many aren't. And so, as difficult as it is to experience resurrection when we're still in this pandemic, I think that allowing ourselves to experience the pain of it gives us an opportunity to fully enter into resurrection. And in some ways, this is a unique opportunity for all of us. And so I'm glad our community was sharing that and blessing us with their experience. If you have stories that you want to share with us about how you've experienced resurrection after your Lenten desert, let us know. Email us again at resistandrestorepodcast@circleofhope.net. I'm so glad that you listen to our podcast. It's great to be building a connection with you and some community even with you. And again, if you want to talk back to us, go to resistandrestorepodcast@circleofhope.net and you can send us an email. If you want to make more people listen to the show because you like it and it's blessed you, give us a glowing review wherever you listen and share it on social media. If you want to contribute to our common fund, which helps make this podcast work and everything that we do in Circle of Hope work, go to circleofhope.net/sharing. All of those things really help us. So review the podcast, share it with friends, and contribute money if you're able. No amount is too little or too great. And continue to journey with us in our cells and in our Sunday meetings. You can go to circleofhope.net/cells. If you're local, some cells are meeting outside right now. If you're not, there are still cells that are meeting online and some that will commit to meeting online even when we're through this mess. And online as well at Circle of Hope/online meeting, we still worship at 5 o'clock on Sundays. You can tune into our live stream. And even as that comes to a close in the next few months, we'll have something else for you that you can connect with online. Once again, if you don't live in the Philadelphia region. So we're still looking out for you, and we want you to be a part of us. And then pray along with us. circleofhope.net/daily prayer is for people that are taking their first steps of faith. And circleofhope.net/daily prayer deeper are for the individuals that have been journeying with Jesus for a little longer. It's accessible for everybody, but on this particular blog, you'll hear a cornucopia of voices over the year. Over 24 contributors, so it's very lush, very good. So that's how you pray along with us. Thanks again for listening. So glad to have my friend Andrew Yang on our podcast, and glad to share him with you. He's one of my favorite people, and it's exciting that we're connected this way. I first met Andrew over 10 years ago at a Sunday meeting. He was there with his girlfriend Amy, who is now his wife, and I walked up to them and I said, "Are you guys sister and brother, or are you dating?" Which was totally a weird and uncomfortable question for them and for everybody, but I still did it. And then amazingly, we're still friends. Uh-huh. So That speaks to something, right?
Yeah, for sure it does. I do remember that being very awkward.
Andrew has come to fame in Circle of Hope really because of the music that he's written. He's a very mild-mannered person, but he writes these songs that have such an incredibly evocative nature to them, but also just deep theology. Definitely want to talk to you about this today. But let's start this way. You're a child of immigrants, much like me, except your parents didn't come from Egypt like mine. They came from Taiwan. And then you grew up in the Lehigh Valley. How did you get into playing music? How did you become a musician? Tell us the story.
Well, I guess when I was like 4 or 5, my mom asked me which instrument I wanted to play, piano or violin. And I told her that I wanted to play the violin. And then for the rest of my adolescence, whenever I complained about the violin, she always pointed out that I was the one who picked the violin. So I was classically trained in the violin, did violin stuff all the way up, well, until now, for all my whole life. Although I transitioned to being to the type of music that I played broadened, I guess, around high school. So I was doing jazz and folk and playing with bands and stuff and doing open mics in Emmaus.
So you moved from classical music to jazz music. That was a significant change.
It was a significant change. I mean, it was a significant change because the jazz tradition allows for, I think, a lot more improvisation and personal expression. I think the idea of personal expression was probably significant to me as well as an adolescent, also as an Asian American, where I was thinking about, like, how do I resist the stereotype of being Asian? A lot of my life, I feel like, has been trying to push back against people's expectations of me. So I was saying this to a friend the other day, like, even to the extent that, like, I jammed with people at, like, old time jams or folk jams. Like, I would show up to these places, the only person of color in this circle of white dudes playing Appalachian folk music, and I would just kind of muscle my way in. And my attitude was like, I can at least be as good as you.
That's awesome.
I can, like, do this thing. I feel like these days I'm less into breaking my way into places that don't want me, but
totally.
At least at the time, like, I definitely was thinking, like, oh, I can be at least as good as these white people with this kind of music. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that motivated you. Tell us about the electric violin and the loop pedal. Andrew has this magical instrument that this was really helpful during the pandemic because he would play songs and then it would be like there was a whole orchestra, as far as I could tell, doing it along with him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, isn't that like, I had not done loop pedal stuff for a long time until the pandemic.
I remember the first time I saw you do a loop pedal, 17th Street, open mic. You do, and this is on YouTube too, if you want to look up Andrew on YouTube. I don't know if he keeps that account updated. He's shaking his head, no, don't go there.
Nope.
But he did This Modern Love by Block Party. Block Party came out with one good album, and that was one of them. And that was it. So He did This Modern Love by Block Party. Baby, you got to, you are demanding. What are you holding out for? What's always in the way? Why so damn absent-minded? Why so scared? All this. And I see it, and I'm like, oh, this guy's incredible. He must be a worship leader. So your loop pedal changed the game.
Yeah, the funny thing is that cover of This Modern Love is really a cover of a cover. It's a cover of Owen Pallett's cover of This Modern Love. I do have my own arrangements of songs, but that one was Owen Pallett's arrangement. That kind of taught me how to use the loop pedal to play and sing. That's kind of, so what the loop pedal does is it takes a phrase of music and it repeats it so that you can then play over that piece of music. really the reason that I got a loop pedal in the first place was I wanted to sing and play, but I was too lazy to play guitar or learn how to play guitar. So I figured, oh, this will let me sing and play with this loop pedal. So that's what I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love that thing. So our community is unique in some ways because we write a lot of our own songs. You probably have to come to our Sunday meetings for like 2 months before you hear a repeated song. And sometimes you won't hear them anywhere else. What do you think is valuable about faith communities writing their own songs for worship?
What I like about our community and the music that arises out of it is that all the music that we write ourselves suits the community and the culture of the community. What I think about is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians when he's describing what he sees as orderly worship and the idea of one person bringing a psalm or another person bringing an instruction or a revelation or a tongue or something. This idea that whatever is part of the worshipful expression of the community is that which it comes out of the people in the community. And I think ideally that's what we see in our congregations. The songs that we sing are expressions of our creativity and also our relationship with God, and teach us something about God through that relationship. You know, for instance, like I really like one of the songwriters that I really like in our community was James Porter, who saw God, who sees God in a very particular way, which is expressed through his songs. Like a lot of his songs talk about like this desire to be kind of consumed or taken up with God or united with God. There's a lot of that kind of yearning there.
Wonderful. So you're saying sometimes the songs themselves shape the community, and there are some songs like on the CCM circuit, top 40 on what's that Christian radio station called that's everywhere?
Is it K-Love?
I think it's K-Love, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That shapes communities to be in a certain form. So evangelical communities all kind of have the same style. I'm wondering this.
Mm-hmm.
Are there songs that have longevity and adaptability that can exist across communities? Obviously, the Psalms in the Bible are an example of that. You know,
yeah.
Is Charles Wesley infinitely adaptable?
Is Charles Wesley infinitely adaptable? I don't know. I don't know if he's infinitely adaptable, but I definitely think he's adaptable and relevant to our community. I definitely think it's. I'm not saying we should jettison the whole tradition of worship music that comes from outside our particular community, because obviously a lot of that music informs how we worship now. I mean, just for instance, the song that I wrote for Lent has a line that's cribbed straight from Charles Wesley.
That's right.
The line in Let Us Be Free is, made like you we rise, which is just a redux of what's the Easter song?
Christ the Lord is risen today is the song. Made like you we rise is the line from Charles Wesley. What's your version?
Made like you we rise is my version. In Christ the Lord is risen today. Charles Wesley has the line, made like him we rise.
That's it, yeah.
So I just stole that straight from Charles Wesley. Like a lot of the songs that I write are adaptions or have language from the scriptures, or from scripture or creeds or church fathers and mothers, and Charles Wesley I think is included in that too. So I think the tradition is useful, including the tradition of music.
And I think what you're teaching us is that understanding the context of when songs are written, whether it's the Psalms, which help us understand things like the imprecatory Psalms. Maybe you should write an imprecatory song for us once.
That would be a challenge.
That'd be really interesting. Or even "It Is Well With My Soul," right? This song by a man who lost his business in the Chicago fire, lost his family in the Titanic. You know, that really, Horatio Spafford's the guy, and it really does change the meaning of the song. And so bringing the context of the song to the community is really helpful. And I think it would be great if we could keep framing our original songs within the context they were written. And really that personal connection that you're talking about, like that James had with God, his personal experience then encourages us to have our own personal experiences with God as well. So I think that's really great.
Yeah.
What's a song that you love to do an adaptation of? You want to talk back about that?
Well, let me answer both questions at once. One of the songs that I love doing an adaptation of is Aaron Foltz's "Bringing Us Home."
Are bursting in song, and the trees of the field start clapping along. You've walked through the fire, you've walked through alone, you've promised the world, you're bringing us home. Where's your control? What the world tore apart, the Lord's making whole. Death, death, where is your sting? There is life bursting forth from the grave of the King. Sin, sin, where's your control? What the world tore apart, the Lord's making whole.
Which he wrote a little while ago as a post-Easter song, and kind of is now having kind of a second life in the community and circulating through the community. It's really cool to see songs do that. But he also wrote a song called "Winter Lent," which I really like. I don't do it much, and it has all this it's so great. And it has the line like, "All the frost chilled my heart like the ice killed the cows, but I'll follow you out past the edge of this town." And if you know where Aaron grew up, in kind of Del Mar area on a farm, this song talking about the kind of icy chill of the Advent season and feeling the closeness and distance of God comes straight out of his experience. So when I sing this song, when I sing Winter Lent, I think about Aaron and his farm, and his relationship with God, and all of these great associations that come out of that context, the context of specifically our friendship.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. So you really resurrected Bringing Us Home. We were just playing it on Easter, and now we're talking about Winter Lent. It's so cool that you bring these songs, and I'll give them even new life and different life. And so your experience then is layered onto someone else's, and that's the beauty of collaboration and the thing that we're doing together. You've written a lot of songs for us, Andrew. Some of them you wrote for a given week, and then no one ever played them again. And then some of them have grown in popularity, you might say. What's one that surprised you with its popularity?
Yeah. That is true. Sometimes I will write a song for a particular week, and it'll be done that week, and then it'll just kind of vanish. And there are some songs kind of just stick around in perpetuity. Light from Light, for instance, I guess has become a kind of Christmas classic of Circle of Hope.
Be now our warmth and our fire and light. Enter with us into the shadow of night. Make bright the way so that we may all see. Take on our chains so that we may be free. From all time, Son of God. One with Him, one with us.
I am surprised by the popularity of that one.
Tell us about how you wrote that song, Light from Light. Where did you get that term from?
Light from Light, the language and a lot of the imagery comes from the Nicene Creed. But specifically, I think what I was working with was a quote from Athanasius of Alexandria, which is, that which has not been assumed is not redeemed, but that which is united to the Godhead is saved forever. I'm probably not getting that quite right, but this idea that in being us, God saves us, and reflecting on that idea of the incarnation, basically.
Totally. Athanasius is great about the incarnation.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to capture in that song.
You definitely draw on the church fathers and mothers a lot, and you did so again in your version of Psalm 139.
Through my disguise, you have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts, they are restless as hell. If I fly on wings of morning and sleep at the end.
Which is interesting. It's another song written about a song, and obviously not the first rendition of Psalm 139 by an artist. And then you borrow this line from Augustine: "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts, they are restless until," and then you delayed it throughout the song, and then you finally finish it, "until they rest in you." That's a really popular one too, Andrew. Going back to Light from Light, you wrote a version for it for Tenebrae 2 weeks ago that kind of envelops the life of Jesus from incarnation to death. And I think that shows, like, in some ways, your song's popularity gave it its own or very well good reception. I don't want to say popularity. It's not popular because it's a great song. It actually compels people to God and to worship. But you really do envelop the life of Christ with this line. Wrapped tight in cloth, a babe fresh from the womb, one day be bloodied and wrapped for the tomb. Such a wonderful image of who Jesus is and his life on earth. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks. And also, funny thing about the Lent version of that song is just that Bryant said to me, like, I really think that Light from Light would work for our Good Friday service. This was back when we were composing it a few years ago. And he was like, but maybe some of the imagery is still just too Christmassy, or the associations are too Christmassy. So I was like, all right, I can rework it. And I did. So that a lot of the songs arise that way, kind of out of liturgical necessity, because of a given situation or theme or week.
Well, in Tenebrae, we're reflecting on Mary in particular, and Mary's obviously in the incarnation story, and maybe even not considered very well on Good Friday, but she was a suffering mother losing her son. And we made that connection to, Mamie Till suffering when Emmett Till was killed. So beautiful connection. Thanks again, Andrew. And you're right. Songs do come from liturgical occasions such as Lent. in this Lent, I asked you to write a worship song for us, and you did. And then during the season, we had different artists do their own versions of it. So it debuted the first week of Lent. And then the assignment was for the next week of Lent, listen to this song and then do your own version of it.
Let us be free from dead ways of living and to share in the newness of life that you give, to be joined in your death and join with your rising, and to join in the breaking of death as we live.
It had to be simple enough to be repeated, but I gave you a difficult assignment because it was based on Romans 6 of all chapters. What was the issue with Romans 6 to you?
Romans 6, first of all, yeah, when you say that was the assignment, you gave me the assignment, Johnny. You were like, do this thing.
Yes.
Here's the deadline.
I like that.
So the tough thing about Romans 6 is that it was like putting a legal text to music. It was like trying to turn a legal text into poetry, which is its own challenge. But also, the ideas in it of sin and slavery and bondage have all these really complicated associations for people. So the tough thing to write this song was to get through those associations to the beating heart of what Paul is talking about, which is putting to death ways of existence that are deathly, and how Jesus resurrects us through his resurrection. So that's what the song is really my attempt to get at that idea.
So then what was it like to hear other artists do this song? The first week Zach does it, and he does this version of it. Let's listen to it.
Let us be free from dead ways of living, to share in the newness of life that you give, to be joined in your death and join with your rising, to join in the breaking of death as we live. But we shall all be changed. At last will be remade, made like you will rise.
So Zach had a very different take on it, and it was fresh. It was just fresh after you introduced it to us. What did you think about that?
I really loved Zach's version of it, and Zach's version is everything that I love about the way that our community does music, which is when I did my version, I kind of do a slow bit and then I do a fast bit. And my intention there was basically just to show people that it could be done either way. I wasn't expecting people to copy me, and thankfully Zach didn't. He did his own thing. He does his own instrumentation. He does this beautiful thing in the chorus where he adds a kind of breath or a rest between the phrases that allows the phrases "made like you we rise," and then there's a pause. It allows it to kind of, it allows us to reflect on that, which I was really, it totally works, and I would never have thought to do that. I think in general, for me, everything is very on the beat, and also I'm kind of an impatient person, so I would never have thought to just put a rest there, but he does, and it works, and it's beautiful.
And then how about, by the time we get to Palm Sunday, we've done it 5 different times. Palm Sunday is the 6th Sunday of Lent, and on the 6th version, you get Ben Rosenbach, who does it in a totally different way. Not just a solo, lots of different voices, and then something mysterious happens in the middle.
We shall all be changed.
So when you listened to that for the first time, what was your experience of it? What happened?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a vibraphone in it, which is super cool. Love the vibraphone. Second of all, there is that rhythmic heartbeat drum as the song builds to a climax. And Ben delays the line "made like you would rise" until the very end, until the climax of the song, which is so dramatic and so cool. When he sent me the version, I was like, oh, I really dig the heartbeat drums. Heartbeat drums are cool. And he was like, thanks, that's Avi's heartbeat from before he was born. Which is amazing. Like, he put his unborn son heartbeat into this version of the song, which is incredible and beautiful. And everything that I like about the way that we do music, he took this song and made it intensely personal. And now whenever I listen to it or sing it, that's going to be part of the way that I approach it. That's going to be part of the context that I use it to worship.
And you talked about, you've spoken to me about how your willingness and your encouragement that people might adapt your songs to different purposes comes from the difference between your experience playing classical music versus your experience playing jazz. Tell us about the difference there.
Yeah. I mean, in jazz, you've got these jazz standards. You've got these jazz standards of the Great American Songbook, but but every performer is interpreting these standards in a different way. It's no big deal if you want to change the chords or change the key or add a solo or rearrange it. It's the song is a template for the personal expression of the performer, and the performer brings something new and interesting to it. That's really the attitude that I really like that, as opposed to the classical music, which wasn't always this way, first of all, but is much more restricted in how you play it, and it values playing it to the page in the key with the dynamics as indicated. I think the jazz approach is more interesting to me. Also, yeah, I mean, this is a little bit tangential, but in terms of violin music and violin performers, in terms of 20th century violin performers, there was like one guy who dominated violin performance, and that's Jascha Heifetz. Like, 20th century violin can be separated into two eras, like before Heifetz and after Heifetz. And after Heifetz, everybody sounds like Heifetz. And one of the reasons for that is because like recording technology was invented, and his vinyls started getting passed around, and everybody really dug his style of playing. So now all violinists sound like Heifetz. But before Heifetz, you have all this incredible variety of different ways of playing these like classical music songs. So I'm nerding out about classical music right now, but I guess that's what. Yeah, I mean, that's like what I think that I feel like that's kind of what that's the kind of creative environment that I would like to, that I'm glad we are cultivating at Circle of Hope, an environment where like different expressions arise organically out of our community, as opposed to just one monoculture that dominates the whole thing and stamps out any dissent.
So you love the adaptation. I have to point this out, though. Sometimes there are adaptations that essentially change the meaning of your song, and that sort of theological shift can be frustrating. I want to point this out to you because I've talked about this at length with people, because I think it's a really theologically important point. In "Come Be My Rock," you sing, "So we follow you to die, we follow you to rise. Lord, teach us how to die. Our sinful selves have died. With you we're crucified, and then in you we rise."
You know what it is to die, and then again to rise. You die and then to rise. Oh, you to die, ahead of us to rise, the first of us to rise. So we follow you to die, we follow you to rise. Lord, teach us how to die. So our sinful selves have died, with you were crucified, and then in you we rise.
That phrase, "with you were crucified," is important because the way the song is structured, what is being crucified with Christ is our sinful self. That's being gone. We're dead to sin, alive in Christ, that kind of image. But then people would change that W-E-R-E, were, to the contraction we are or we're. So all of a sudden, we are now dying with Christ as opposed to our sinful selves. And even though you can make an allusion to that using the text, using the Bible, that wasn't the purpose of your song. And so it is a sort of mutation of your song that is, I would say, not a different sort of adaptation than what you welcome. Would you say that's right?
That's completely right. Like, well, the idea that I was trying to get at in that phrase is that our sinful selves have died, and in some way, what rises is us. What rises is us. Our sinful selves have died. I'm not trying to get people to beat up on themselves and be like, "Oh, I'm so sinful and I'm dead, but now I'm alive." I think there's enough of that in Christian culture, and I'm not interested in that. Also, that interpretation of sin, I think, is pretty boring. I don't think we need more of that. I think that's the kind of change. You are right in that, like, I guess this is a good example of the fact that I don't welcome every change, because that's an example of a change that comes out of laziness. It comes out of like theological laziness and poetic laziness. Theological laziness in that, like, this is just what we've heard our whole lives. Like, you're a worm, you're gross, God hates you, you're a spider being held over a fire.
Jonathan Edwards, yeah.
And that's right, and that's what we gravitate toward. It's also kind of, I think it's kind of a lazy way to interpret the song. Right? I'm trying to do like a poetic inflection there just to fit the phrasing, but people just assume that I forgot an apostrophe, which
that's really interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And there's no way you would forget an apostrophe.
Well, I would hope people have more faith in me than that. But I get that it's a little confusing poetically. It does frustrate me how often that error comes up.
It just happened a few weeks ago, right?
It did. It happened last Tuesday, and I feel like such a pedant for pointing it out. But it does annoy me.
It happened when our congregation did it on Tuesday night?
Yeah, it did.
During ours, oh man, that's on me, Andrew. You're calling me out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a whole thing. I mean, it's a community effort.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about it now. I want to get to one last aspect of your music, which I think is justice. You are a social security disability lawyer. You host the Color Correction podcast. You serve on Circle Mobilizing Because Black Lives Matter, which has raised money for people that need bail, and has also participated in the Participatory Defense Hub, helping people get the stuff they need for their trials. How has justice intersected with music and faith for you?
I like to think that Jesus and what Jesus is doing in the world are what motivates me in writing music or in the work that I do. I think ideally that's what happens. I do tend to keep all of those things.
So the Color Correction audience will be surprised that you're doing a podcast with Resist and Restore about music, since you never bring up music when you talk on Color Correction.
Yeah, I was on the text thread with Chris and Beth, and they were like, "Why didn't they invite us all on?" And I was like, "Oh, it's because Johnny's talking to me about songwriting."
Oh yeah,
it's kind of funny because, like, Johnny, you were on Color Correction a few weeks ago, and now we're having a completely different conversation.
Well, yeah, the depths of Andrew Yang. I
mean, that's a very it would be very self-aggrandizing for me to agree with that. I just to think that I don't know. This is kind of my personal kind of therapy thing on me, but I am afraid that people won't take me seriously if they know that I do more than one thing.
Well, that is interesting. Well, I take you very seriously, and I saw that your justice, passion for justice really shone through on this song you wrote for Pentecost.
Holy wisdom, soaring power, cloud of holy dread. Mountain fire, God provider, rest upon our head. Brooding spirit, holy dove, fill us in your wings. Guard us, spend us.
Another good season to write songs for, because people don't write a lot of Pentecost songs.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the chorus. Holy wisdom, soaring power, cloud of holy dread, mountain fire, God provider, rest upon our heads. Then the second chorus is fiery pillar, holy healer, waker of the dead, liberator, bondage breaker, rest upon our heads. Soaring power, cloud of holy dread, God provider, mountain fire, right? All these strong images of God, right? Who liberates, who breaks bonds. You know, that is a story that is told throughout the Bible. In the Exodus, in the wilderness, through the cross, on Pentecost. Powerful song that clearly weaves your passion for justice and a God who is a liberator into the song, and then also offers the congregation who's singing it the same sort of feeling. I always raise my fist in the air when I'm singing that song, because it is that sort of justice-oriented, justice-forward description of God that I think is equally lacking in a lot of Christian music.
Yeah, thanks. I do think again, a lot of the language from that song is drawn from Old Testament descriptions of God, and also from Hildegard von Bingen, her Over to Sapienti. And what I was going for in that chorus was not just those strong, very aggressive descriptors of God's power, but also the fact that as a Pentecost song, you know, rest upon our heads. I was struck by the image of like the Shekinah, like the cloud of glory, the pillar of fire in the Old Testament being kind of small and intimate enough to just kind of hover over somebody's head, and the juxtaposition of those powerful images of God, but also that idea of, you know, the flame being small enough to be over your head. I think that's
awesome.
What surprised me.
Who were some of your musical or poetic inspirations, Andrew, before we go?
Yeah. All right. I was at the I took a kind of mini vacation to the MoMA a couple of weeks ago. And one of the exhibits there was an exhibit for somebody who's not a visual artist, but a poet, Frank O'Hara, who he's actually one of my favorite poets. He's a poet in the New York school. He was writing in the 60s. Lunch Poems is probably his most famous book, a book of poems that he wrote during his lunch breaks. But one of the things that I love about Frank O'Hara is his description of the school of poetry that he mockingly founded called personism, where his idea is that a poem should feel as intimate as a phone call. While he was writing this poem, he was like, oh, I could just call this person. So what I aspire to and what I value in songs that I listen to or songs that I write is this feeling that it is personal, that it feels as intimate as a phone call. So I try to use language that does feel surprising and intimate and personal. I like songs from my friends that feel that way, that make me feel connected to them. So I guess I don't know. I'm listening to there are like artists that are significant for me in growing up that feel intimate to me, like Sufjan Stevens, for instance.
Sure.
I've been listening to a lot of Moses Sumney, like Taylor Swift. I'm taking Taylor Swift very seriously this year. My buddy Mike and I used to
That's great.
Used to do covers of Taylor Swift as a joke in high school, but now I'm listening to the 2 albums that she released this past year, which are very good. And one of the reasons they're so good is because they're such intimate stories. I think in the they're such intimate stories. It's not as if Taylor Swift hasn't written songs that are personal to her in the past, but these are both, even the songs that are fictional, where she's telling like a fictional story, like they feel vulnerable and personal, things that I connect with when I want to listen to music or write music.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for being on our show. It's good to have you. Before we go, just tell us where we can find you online so we can keep following you.
I'm trying to put more music out on my Instagram
which is what?
At Andrew Lee PHL. And also, of course, you should listen to the Color Correction podcast, which you can find anywhere podcasts are distributed.
That's awesome. Love the show too, by the way. It's a great show. Go definitely give them a good review so more people can hear them.
Yeah.
And while you're at it, give us a good review too.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent, Andrew. Thanks for being on here. It's good to have you and good to hear you specifically about your songwriting. And I'm so grateful for your contributions to our community. Thank you again.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, we've been talking all this time about things that have been nourishing our souls, like Andrew Yang's songs. And we set aside this time at the end of our podcast to get specific about our personal lives as pastors. What has been nourishing our souls recently? I think we're always looking for God to provide in this way, and God keeps showing up. So, pastors Jonny and Julie, what's been nourishing your souls lately?
I love the New York Times op-ed section in general, and I like it during the Easter season, particularly because you get these very eloquent and passionate people sharing about their faith. And for me, in a season where more than 50% of the population is not regularly attending a church, I get joy out of good people proclaiming the good news in the public square. And it's nice to me that these 2 columns from Esau McCauley and Peter Weiner were something that Christians said that wasn't embarrassing. That feels good to me. I really do like that. So I'll link those 2 in the show notes, but I want to share a section from each of them if you'll let me. Here's from Esau McCauley's column, and it's called The Unsettling Power of Easter. He says, "After we take off those suits and sundresses and hats, we return to a world that is racialized. The black skin that set nicely against those yellows and blues also makes us stand out as we live in a world that calls our skin a danger. We need more than a celebration. We need unsettling presence." I think that's very well said. So thank you, Esau. And Peter Weiner, who worked for many Republican administrations. Rachel and I were amused that we got this from a Republican, just to be partisan for a second. But he and I do not agree about politics. But I thought the voices that he collected here were really good. And Philip Yancey has a special place in my heart. I grew up evangelical, and Philip Yancey's an evangelical too. And if I can say this, he's one of the good ones. The column is about why does Jesus bear wounds after the resurrection? Such an interesting thing to consider. Philip Yancey, this is Peter writing, Philip Yancey, in responding to my query about why the glorified body of Jesus would be disfigured by scars, said, Jesus retained wounds to stand as visual proof. He could have had a perfect body or no body when he returned to splendor in heaven. Instead, he kept a remembrance of his visit to earth and a keepsake for his time here. And for a keepsake of his time here, he chose scars. The pain of humanity became the pain of God. And that is just a beautiful image of the incarnation, how Jesus carries his wounds with him to connect to us and to remember, you know. And that makes me wonder, like, when our bodies are glorified, will we bear the marks that we have incurred on this earth? Will we still be human? And what does that mean to be fully human? And so I love being in a tradition that can enter into the complexities of human life, that doesn't want to erase them or make them perfect, even as death is defeated. You know, that makes me feel really real, you know, more attuned to who I am. I'm not transcending all of this alone. There's something happening within me. It's intimate, it's personal. So those two columns really did nourish my soul.
So good.
Yes.
Jonny, I'll follow you because mine is connected to that. What's nourished my soul recently is the journey through Holy Week. We, as a community, we journey with Jesus in his last week leading to his death in this intense kind of way. We gather every night, and we're used to doing it in person. And I really missed the rigor of that, to reorganizing my whole life to like show up at different places throughout the city to do this. But we found creative ways to do it online. And, you know, on Friday, on Good Friday, we take this meditative journey, a walk with Jesus to the cross. And it's such a powerful experience to kind of reorder this image. Someone in my cell was saying, you know, when I hear he is risen, I just picture this white man floating up into the sky, and I just can't. I'm out. I can't do that. Like, Easter just doesn't, like, saying he is risen. That just brings up all that for me. And the way of the cross and this journey through Holy Week has really reordered so much of that kind of imagery and what was can be just a whitewashed Jesus, because we're walking with Jesus, who is interrogated and accused and misunderstood and criminalized and arrested, and that is it nourishes my soul in that it really kind of awakens me again to the reality of who Jesus is and what he did and what he endured in the context of our present moment. You know, we take this journey with Jesus in our communities, in our daily lives, to see Jesus suffering. And it connects me with the suffering of those around me, and with what I too need to suffer as I take up my cross and follow Jesus. So I'm grateful for that journey together as a community, and it nourished my soul.
Indeed. Coming right off of that week, we had a conversation last night online around why we value dialogue over doctrine as a circle of hope. And it really, really nourished my soul. I think first and foremost to see so many new friends there in the conversation who want to be part of, or are at least interested in forming our church together, even in this time. And So it was just exciting to listen to each other and to talk to each other, to see new faces. We are really replanting the church together.
Totally agree.
That feels miraculous right now. And yes, and the substance of our conversation, I think, just matched the embodiment of it, because we were talking about how doctrine, being too attached to particular intricacies of what we believe or don't believe, can be kind of a false gatekeeping device that keeps people out of fellowship with Jesus and others. And instead, and it's not that stuff isn't interesting to us. We like to be intellectual. Theological ideas are important. We like to wrestle with them together, but we put more priority on this conversation with one another as people, as human beings on a journey with God. We are centering around Jesus as the incarnate God, but other than that, we're trying to see each other as people and carry each other. There's seasons of our lives where we feel like we have lots of faith, and maybe then seasons where we don't, and that's okay. It's all part of the journey, and we're in it together. So I was feeling that last night in our conversation, and hope we keep on moving together. And you're part of that, even by listening to this podcast right now. And so we hope that you'll keep journeying with us, with Jesus, along the way too. Hope you can join us again soon.